first question I would like to ask you, of course, is how would you describe your experience in Israel so far? We all were investors, us journalists, me, myself, were pretty skeptical last year when you came. We didn't understand why a famous person in New York real estate market who is in the center of the most sophisticated financial market has to come to Israel for money. How would you describe your first year here, and do you think that something changed in the Israeli approach? Yeah.
Is this working? Okay. Before I get to that, I just want to point out to everybody we have beautiful apartments for sale at 157. If anybody's interested, feel free to come. That was the deal. I come to speak and I get a free advertisement.
Almost the same price as an apartment in Rehovot.
You know, if you have to ask how much, you can't afford it. Anyhow, yeah, no, the experience has been actually wonderfully nice. You know, coming here to begin with, I thought, oh, it's Israel, it will be very tough and, you know, hard to manage, but it's been a universally, you know, nice experience. Everybody has been very professional, business-like, our underwriters. There was no, you know, no arguments. Everybody who we went to see on the roadshow and the institutions were received very nicely. Really an exceptional, very professional and you know, pleasant experience. And of course, we walked away with substantial sums of funds.
$1 billion shekels for the first time.
Not bad for a beginning.
But difficult questions were raised. Why do you come here to replace expensive loans with the cheap money in the Israeli debt market? At the first time, first round, not many institutional investors bought your...
You know, beginnings are always a little more difficult till the market gets used to it, but I think the market's gotten very used to it now, and they're, you know, busy funding, you know, many American firms now.
And the second round, now you decided to raise more money, and it's different, your experience, the questions
I think we had more institutional investors. People understood now a little bit more about the business in America, a little more willing to invest overseas, not just in Israel. So it was, I think, a second success, and we're happy with the outcome. I mean, there are a lot of expenses involved in actually borrowing the funds, because you have the cost of hedging, you have all the costs of being public, all of the fees and expenses. And then what people miss also is the arbitrage, because if you take money for a specific project, you put the money in the project, it's used immediately. When you're finished, you pay it back immediately. With bond funds, you know, you take the money, it sits for a while till you can utilize it. When you get it back, you can have to sit for a while also to reserve it for repayment. So on an overall basis, it's not as inexpensive as if you just looked at the interest rate in Israeli shekels. It's actually far more expensive to the fundraising company as opposed to just taking a project-related loan.
So why did you do that?
So first of all, I've learned some of this as I go along, but it provides essentially money that's very difficult to raise, right? It's corporate equity money that's discretionary funds. So that's a valuable resource, and up to a certain amount worth acquiring those kind of funds. Project-related are project-related, but it's specific. And when you have a corporate available for all uses and discretionary and available for quick use, that's a valuable resource. And so it was worthwhile for us to take on a limited amount of borrowing. It's still very low leverage for the company.
Okay, so now after 2 rounds, what would you say to American developer who considers raising money in Israel? What was the most difficult part, the most difficult experience for you? Questions?
I don't think we had a difficult experience at all. I don't think it was difficult. I think it was very pleasant. I think the consideration is to, first of all, from a business viewpoint, to make sure that you're going to be able to utilize the money and to look at all of the costs and all of the issues about being a public company, and that's one thing. And then from the ethical viewpoint, to be damn sure you're going to be able to pay it back. You don't want to come to Israel to, create a mess.
That's the big questions. The big question is the ability to pay back. With your company, we received here smaller companies. You're probably familiar with them. Do you think that there are big differences, that some money Israeli investors won't see back?
I don't want to say that I think that Israeli investors won't see back. I do think it's important to discriminate between the companies, the borrowers, and not just rely on the rating agencies' blanket endorsement, because we saw that movie in America and I think worldwide, right, 6 years ago, where people were just buying based on ratings, and the ratings turned out to be wrong. And the metrics that rating agencies use are sometimes don't take into account significant change. And of course, there is real risk. Not to say that it will happen, but there's interest rate risk. In many of the cases, we're seeing ratings based on appraised values. The appraised values are based on an environment of exceptionally low cap rates. These are leveraged, valuations, so they're subject to dramatic changes based on a movement in interest rates. So there's some risk in ultimately in repayment based on interest rate movement. Not to say again that anything bad will happen. The markets are exceedingly favorable right now. We're in a really fantastic environment.
Yes, that's my next question. Now it all looks very good for you. During the last year, I think you sold the 2 most expensive penthouses ever in New York's history. But we are now almost after 5 years of prices going up in the New York luxury market. What will happen to debt here when the prices will collapse in New York, or just go down without collapsing?
Real estate's a cyclical business. So in principle, everything goes up, goes up, goes up, and then it goes down, goes down, goes down, right? That's a cycle. So what could cause that cycle to not repeat itself? I mean, as you say, New York has been a rising market, and it ought to start turning down. We haven't seen that. So just to give you a little bit of a news point, Vornado, which is building directly across the street from our new project on 57th Street, a Central Park Tower, in the last 6 weeks, they sold over $1 billion worth of apartments, a third sold. And they're continuing to see tremendous demand.
So it's a sign of a hot market, maybe
it is.
Too hot.
Well, it is, but people thought that we were hot, and then they thought Macklowe was hot, and they said, how long can it continue? But now Vornado's taken it to the next level. The pricing is over $8,000 a square foot on average. They will probably be breaking the new records for residences. So it's not clear to me that we have to see a turn down in the New York market. A stabilization, perhaps a little bit of a lessening. We don't have to see a collapse. And the reason I say that is there are some markets that can defeat the cycle. And how do you defeat a cycle? Is when there is somewhat of a limitation on supply and there's an abnormal increase in demand. And this is true in a few cities in the world. It was true in London. London is kind of slowing down a little bit. It was true, for example, in China for a while because you had such a tremendous, constantly increase in supply. In New York City, there's limitations on supply. Although there's more supply coming, it's not that easy to get land and to be able to build. But also you see tremendous continued inflows of demand, and that may help lessen or beat the cycle of really seeing a collapse now, because there's such an influx of demand from all over the United States. So the youth of the country and the youth of the world want to come here, but also the wealth of the world is coming here. We're seeing tremendous inflows from all over the world that want to buy and invest in the United States on an individual basis and on an institutional basis. So that may actually, it's possible that we'll have a happy ending here.
But isn't it too optimistic? We saw different cycles that we thought were defeated, but it's not true. If in a scenario that the luxury New York market goes down, say 20%, what happens to your debt here? Will you still able to repay it?
I'm not worried about our position. Our position is a super low leverage. Our cost basis is a fraction, literally a fraction. I don't mean 70, 80%. I mean 20, 30, 40% of what the market value is. We've never seen, 6 years ago when the market collapsed, we didn't see any reductions in the value of prime residential real estate more than 15 to 20%. So I'm not concerned about ours. I am concerned about some of the valuations that are being put, which are being put on today's, and even if you stress it, that they're stressing 10, 20%, won't necessarily be enough because remember, developers create value, so we're ahead of the game. We're creating value through our development. If you're just a cash flowing company, it's really all about a cap rate and an interest rate game. That's really your one metric, because you're not creating additional value. For us, we're actually creating value by building. So I'm not concerned really about ours, but of course I'm concerned about the market and our own valuations. And I pay my people to worry. I like people to worry. I'm worried, but normally I'd be very worried because, like you say, the market's very strong. But I think in the case of New York City and given where we are, there is definitely downside risk, but I don't think that it's obvious. It isn't necessary.
Speaking of inflated real estate prices, you probably know that in Israel we are dealing with this issue of overpriced real estate market, residential. Do you have any suggestions for our new Minister of Construction, maybe how to solve this problem?
So, Sophie, all of these questions, you're not going to be loved in New York and you won't be loved in Tel Aviv.
I'm used to it, it's fine.
Well, look, I think Tel Aviv or Israel overall is a little bit similar in a way to New York, not in the sense that you do have continuing influx of demand from around the world, right? Other people who want to buy in Israel and in some of the major markets. But I think a lot of that demand has been satisfied to some extent. It's not overall as big a market. So sure, as everybody in the room here knows, there's downside risk in the Israeli market as well. And I think it's probably more sensitive to interest rate movements than we are in New York City.
Do you think it's possible, it's feasible to restrict investors in going to investors who buy apartments for investment reasons? Do you think it's realistic to restrict them and not let them buy apartments?
I think you see that around the world, right? There's an affordable crisis, and when you have this kind of movement up in real estate, it sucks land out towards the luxury side, right? So there's less land to go around for more affordable units. So governments all around the world are trying to restrain the speculation and the sharp increase in housing. So you're seeing it in China, where they've tacked on extra taxes and anti-flip and anti-loans for second, tertiary, a lot of speculation on houses. They're trying to do it here as well. It's good to try. Hopefully it slows the market down a little bit. It's hard to really get it done. I remember being in Miami 7 or 8 years ago. We tried to keep the flippers out because we thought they might not close. It was risk. You can't do it. They buy under other names. They give it to cousins. It's very difficult really to restrain it in that way. But governments want to do it. I mean, it's probably a worthwhile effort, and in the long run, better for everybody to try and keep the craziness out of the markets.
And affordable housing, do you think it's a realistic solution? Your name is frequently lately on the headlines because of the so-called poor door that you built in your luxury tower. Do you think it's
That's a great label, and if it didn't match, it would never be a story. A poor and door, they match, sounds like a good headline. So, affordable issues are in every desirable city, right? It comes with the territory. If people want to be there and they love being there, it pushes up real estate, and then you have an affordability crisis. And it's really up to the governments to really figure out a way to create housing that is affordable, that everybody has an opportunity to live, and we have a diverse city.
And how to create it in the way that it won't become a ghetto for just for the poor. The solution is putting together the ultra rich and the poor.
I don't know if it's ultra rich, but I think mixed housing in New York City. There's a program called 50-30-20, which is market rate for 30% of it is a little bit better, a little bit wealthier, and then 20% is people who are below the average income. So programs like that are better. It's not a good idea to create separate housing for the poor, and having mixed neighborhoods is good, and there are programs. First, it all starts with the land. Everywhere you look at affordability, it starts with the land. Most places, the government either controls land or has availability of land, and they have to look first and foremost towards providing the land for affordability as opposed to looking at it as a resource of wealth or revenue for the government. If they want to do something, got to get away from thinking we're going to sell and make a lot of money on our land. They've got to provide it as a resource for providing affordable housing.
Okay, and just to sum it up, would you consider investing in the Israeli real estate market, residential or commercial?
I'm really focused on the market I know well right now, and that's New York City, and maybe a couple of other things in America. So I probably am not going to parachute into markets that I don't know, unless I was invited into something really special where I thought I was bringing something to the table.
You probably get offers.
I do. We get offers. We get offers to go to China. We get offers to go to the Middle East. But New York City is a big place. It's big enough for me. I'm happy with what we're doing, and we're going to concentrate on what we do best.
Thank you very much for coming from New York to our conference.